Hey, welcome back to the Group Project Podcast. This is episode number 28. And I've got somebody who I literally just met about 10 minutes ago here through Zoom, LaVonna Roth, who is an internationally known author, keynote speaker, and consultant. So LaVonna, thank you so much for joining me today. Appreciate it.
Oh my goodness, Jared, thank you so much. It's an honor to be on here and I'm excited to learn with you.
So we like a lot of my guests, we kind of just connected on Twitter, and I kind of saw some of the things that you're doing down there in Florida, and was just like, man, if I could get her on here and just kind of share some of the things she's been doing, some of the research she's doing, share some of the books that you've read or wrote. Would just love to pick your brain a little bit. So thank you for coming. You mentioned you had kind of a busy day there, a busy times for you, it sounds like. But why don't you start off just sharing with us a little bit about, gosh, how have you gotten to where you're at right now with the writing the books, the speaking, the consulting? Because you started off as an educator, as a middle school educator and an elementary educator. So maybe just take a few minutes, talk about the path and how you've gotten to where you're at today.
Okay, I sure will. And let me just tell you, it's 100% unplanned. So it's been quite a journey, and one that I never thought I would be here, because I have an introverted side and I also have a shy side. And so I just never in a million years thought this would be the path. But yes, so I taught elementary and secondary and loved it. I went back and got my second master's in educational leadership. So I was getting ready to interview to become an assistant principal when an opportunity came to step out. And when I talked to a few people in our district, they said, oh, you know what? You absolutely could, but I want you to understand that if you leave our district and you try to come back, you will come back as a teacher. You will not come back as an administrator. And I went, what? So I thought, well, I want to know what else is out there in this big world.
Sure.
So I did. I stepped out and I had an opportunity to work for a company. It was actually Walden University, who my second master's was through. And so I recruited for the state of Florida for administrators, teachers to get their master's and doctorate degree through Walden. And about 8 months into it, they came to me and said, hey, we'd love to move you into the business development management, like be that manager for the Southeast. And I was like, no, I appreciate it, but nah. And a month later, they came back and said, no, we really want you to do this. So I stepped into it, but I very quickly realized how far removed I was from students, teachers, sure. Education, yep. Even though it was the education arena, and so I ended up leaving there, and I ended up working for a company that within a month and a half, marketing was laid off, and 3 months later, so was I. And they're not even around today. And so then a short time bit later, I ended up working for another company. And the best way I can describe it to you is that I was screamed at, cussed out 1 minute, and then the next minute told, you know what, God put you in our life for a reason. We're so blessed to have you. And after 4 months of this yo-yo,
yeah,
just crying, like laughing, like just what in the world have I got myself into? And I found out that when I walked in, I was all part-timers in there, but they had a bet on when I walked in how long I would last, because I was the 8th person in 10 months in my position.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I lasted 4 months. And at that point I came home to my husband and I said, if they can run a company treating people like that, then I can run a company and treat people right. And Jared, I didn't know what that meant. I mean, I'd never run a company. I don't have a degree in business, but I did. I jumped, and 12 years later, here we are. And a part of that journey, you mentioned the books, was I was presenting for a publisher, and it was teacher created materials. And they came to me and said, we would love for you to write books on what you're already presenting on. And I was like, nope, I have no interest in writing a book, but thank you. Well, here we are 8 books later.
Wow.
So.
That is before the show, we really didn't talk too much about your journey, but that is a crazy journey that is a few huge leaps of faith for you to like, I'm going to go. And what was going, maybe take me back when you left the assistant, you had the assistant principal job and waiting, or you're going to get it there. And they said, hey, if you leave this, you're going to come back in the classroom. Like, what was going through your mind for like, was that like a 1 hour decision? Was that like a week or a month, or just go back to that time and share about how you finally said, nope, I'm going to go for it.
I think a big catalyst of it was that the person who was asking me to come interview was leaving that position, and she thought I would be a phenomenal fit. And because of that, knowing that I wouldn't say a shoe in, because that's not true,
Mm-hmm.
but knowing that there was a high probability I could get this job, I thought, well, let me go ahead and interview it. And I did. And so that's when I thought, okay, then maybe this is what I'm meant to explore. And so I didn't go and interview for an AP job. Instead, I went and did that. And you talk about a leap of faith. You are correct, especially when I jumped into consulting. I remember specifically sharing this with my husband, and I'm a pretty independent person. He will back that up. He said, this is my plan, and this is what I plan to do. And I hope that you're on board with this. And he looked at me and he said, you better make it work. And he meant that with all the love in the world and all the support in the world.
Yeah.
But he knew financially, you better make this work, And so I'm just someone that I have a ton of fears. I will never say I'm a fearless leader. I don't think there is such a thing as a fearless leader if you care. Right. And I would say the person who opened my eyes to that is Sarah Blakely, who is founder of Spanx.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to her when I was at a summit, and someone said, you're a fearless leader. And she said, oh, I'm not a fearless leader. I'm driven by fear all the time, but I don't let the fear stop me. And I was like, that's me. That's exactly it. Like, I refuse to because I don't want to go to the grave wondering, what if I had? I would rather know that I tried and I had a chance and the opportunity to experience it, but I don't want to wonder what if.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm not a fearless leader. I'm full of fear, but I'm going to go for it anyway.
I love that mindset. And I agree. We only live this life once. We got to take our shots when we have them. And you have definitely done that. Let's go back to the book for a second. So you kind of talked about, hey, we want you to write. And you're like, no, I don't write. I've never written before. And talk about that process when now you've written 8 books. So you went into that never maybe thinking you would write a book, and now here you are. So just tell us about the writing process, or how you got started with your first book.
Yes. So I had all the knowledge in my head. It was a matter of getting on paper. And I go back to my freshman year of college, and I did not do well my freshman year. As a matter of fact, I was put on probation to be kicked out of college. And I thought, what am I going to do? And part of what had not gone well my first semester was I had to take freshman English. Well, freshman English looked like this. It looked like a white piece of paper with my typing on it, because of the typewriter. I'm that old. And it came back to me only marked up with red and a D or an F circled around it. And paper after paper after paper did that. And I failed freshman English. So I adopted the belief that I was a terrible writer. Crazy thing is I retook freshman English and got an A with a different professor. But what did I already have belief around me, and I'd already adopted that mindset and that language that you're a terrible writer, you're not a good writer. I don't know why you ever think you could do that. So when I was asked to write a book, that immediate fear of D's and F's, seeing all the red circles and everything all around it, immediately came to me, and I went, there's no way you could write a book. And then they said, well, we have editors. We have people so then I thought, okay, so if I can just brain dump this, like, oh my goodness, we'll help like organize, edit and all that. And I was like, okay, well then let's go for this. And I'm a procrastinator on things that I don't like to do. Like if it's something that drains me, like writing, most cases, I don't want to do it. It'll take me forever. I was within 1.5 months within my deadline. And I knew pressure. I hadn't written anything in the book, nothing.
Oh.
And I was down to 1.5 months. And so I went and rented a cabin, and my sister came with me, and we had rules that you cannot talk to me while I'm thinking. But what happened is that we brought a printer, and I would type and then print it. And as soon as I printed it, she started editing it. This isn't clear. What does this mean? So she started cleaning it up for me. And that's what we did for an entire 4 days. And by the end of the 4th day, I was almost done with it. Like I could power it out because it was in me. I just had to get it out. So I will say the downside was the upside was I met the deadline. The downside was I didn't meet the deadline because it was supposed to be a K-12 book, but they came to me and they said, well, either you extend the deadline and it add in 9th through 12th, or you stop it at the K-8. Well, I already sold 300 copies of the book, and I had a deadline with someone else. So I went, I have a choice. We're going to go K-8, which I regret so much. But yeah, that was the process. And it was just, one thing led to another.
Oh, well, everybody's got their own styles to how they write books. Some are, 1 hour a day, and they've got, do before work or whatever it might be. But that's so fascinating that you sat, I've heard of this where you go and just hide out at some remote location, totally disconnected, and you just pound it out. And that is great. That's impressive that you're 4 days. And it's nice that you had your sister there helping with the editing process. I
Very
didn't,
much.
why don't you tell us a little bit tell us about your books. Tell us about, what are the themes? Even it goes bigger to your company and to your keynotes. What is kind of the key takeaways if somebody was reading your books or watching your presentation that they would get from you?
Yeah, so I love that you did say that it was fascinating process writing the books, by the way, because fascinating, crazy, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe there's different words I should have used, but
I
uh,
appreciate the fascinating. I
that's
appreciate that.
that's it. I just, yeah.
That was under the gun thing. But yes, so that led to the whole point of those books is all about engaging students. But if we're going to engage them and we're going to throw that term around and assess teachers and evaluate teachers on it and walk into classrooms to determine our students actually engage, then why don't we do it through the lens of how the brain actually learns? And so the books are called Brain Powered Strategies to Engage All Learners, or Brain Powered Lessons to Engage All Learners. And so the whole point and the whole goal there is to get people to better understand, because here's what I knew. I don't typically share this part, but I will with the way this is approaching, is I won awards as a teacher. I won it at the school level, the county level, and I won Florida Elementary Social Studies Teacher of the Year. With that said, I still didn't know why things worked in my classroom, right? I knew some things did and some things didn't. I couldn't tell you why. And it wasn't until I finally went to neuroscience conferences that I went, oh my gosh, like my world was blown open. And I remember like screaming inside going, why do we as educators not know this? We teach the brain every single day, but we don't ever learn this. And so that's when the book started, I started thinking about, okay, how do we take this? How do we bridge this? And so over the years, I've had the privilege of, speaking in Beirut, Lebanon, Switzerland, 2 places in Spain, Ecuador, Canada, and then of course in the United States here. And it's me taking, like, so when I travel internationally, it's neuroscientists, cognitive psychologists. And so they do all of this wonderful clinical research that they share. And then I just kind of bridge that into what does that mean in the classroom? And so when you talk about key takeaways, one of the biggest takeaways, as a matter of fact, I did a live webinar today, a virtual one. I guess that's what a webinar would be. So virtual, yes. But anyway, when I was doing that, like one of the biggest things is I want them to understand what synapse means in the brain. And as educators, we're like, who cares? Who cares? And we care a lot, because when you send one message, the same message throughout the brain over and over and over, that creates the really strong synapse. And so there's a saying in neuroscience, neurons that fire together, wire together. So what that means is, like, when I did my lesson in the classroom, and let's say it was a math lesson, and I was like, this was the best math lesson ever. Like, there's no way they didn't get it, right? There's no way. It was phenomenal. And then they go home and they do the 20 problems, 25 problems, because I know practice makes so-called perfect, right? And they come back and I put up the answers. I discover they missed almost every single one. Well, what just happened in the brain was 25 times incorrect, incorrect, incorrect. So I share a different way, a different approach to that. That's so much more valuable and such. And so that the whole brain is the foundation of what all we do. But along the way of the books and, keynoting and doing breakout sessions, working with schools and districts, a part of that, something unsettling was coming throughout all this. And I couldn't quite figure out what it was. And I was not seeing what I would have thought should have happened with data when it comes to the brain. And what I knew, and now I don't know always the fidelity of what somebody is implementing with something, but it finally hit me. I went, wait a minute. We have kids coming to school from so many unique and different circumstances that the brain is not in a state of learning. And so the brain cannot learn if it's not in a state of learning. So if we have what's called the amygdala, for example, 2 little almond-sized organs deep in the brain and the limbic system, and they are on alert, 0 learning occurs. So we have to create a culture and a philosophy in a school and a classroom that really allows that safety net for kids to maximize learning. So that is when Ignite Your Shine was born.
That's just fascinating. It's, you listed off the synapse and the amygdala. I didn't even pronounce that correctly. It's, I always it's always so hard for me. I read a lot, and there's a lot of books contain that, like the brain research, and it's always so challenging for me to follow it. I kind of skim that part and like, okay, what does this mean? I'm fascinated. You mentioned, like you almost wanted to scream inside your head at some of those early conferences you went to about why do we not know this? Do you remember way back when, like, what some of those early, like, why am I doing this in my classroom? Why am I not doing this differently? What some of those early aha moments were for you early on as you transition from teacher to consultant / writer / speaker?
Yes, all the things. So synapse was definitely one of them. That's why I preach that one all the time and use it as
Sure.
an example, and we expand it and go deeper. But everything, like even like today, for example, when I did, this one was specific to engage your students virtually, but
Yeah.
similar concepts. It's oftentimes we shut ourselves down with thinking, oh gosh, okay, everything I did in the classroom I can no longer do now because now it's virtual. And I want to blow that completely apart, because that is not true. And it's looking at the core of things. And so when we think about, synapse and that strong connection, that applies no matter where you are. It's just a matter of the way you do things. But the way I teach the brain research and train on it, every single thing I do is through a strategy that a teacher can then turn around and implement and use, no matter whether it's in the classroom or whether it's virtual. So that was one takeaway. A second one is that I wanted it to be where educators understood multiple modalities. Because if you actually talk to people in neuroscience and cognitive science and some of that, they will trash learning styles. Like we're kind of a joke in education about the fact learning styles. And the reason is because if I say, oh, Jared, you're a visual learner, then everything you do has to be visual. And when you go to math, I want it visual. When you go to science, I want it, and that is not true at all, right? You might learn a concept visually in one way, but then you learn it auditory another way, or biokinesthetic and such. So the way, it kind of puts everybody into a label in a box. So one of the things that I share is that don't get stuck on learning styles, but do think about what learning styles do. And that is, it provides multiple modalities for the brain. So the same information can be absorbed. So I know everyone can't kind of see me, but a lot of times I turn my arm into a neuron when I'm teaching this, but I have people actually say the parts of the neuron on the arm. And I put in this joke that it's a really lame joke, but I talk about what happens within the brain with all the modalities. So I think and another key takeaway for me was that, yes, learning styles is interesting and informative, but really it's more about the multiple modalities and having kids try it in so many different ways, which I did, but I didn't really make it the strong connection to, that's a huge achievement piece. And
Sure.
there was one more that came to my head, and of course now it's escaped.
No, that's
But there was,
great.
we'll stick with those two for now.
That's
How's
no,
that?
that's great. Well, I do feel like, those learning um, the learning modes you mentioned, the visual versus the kinesthetic versus spatial, whatever it might be. I feel like that was big maybe 15, 20 years ago. And it's kind of going away a little bit. I feel like I haven't heard, it's not a huge buzzword in education, those, so I'm kind of glad that your research or what you've learned also kind of confirms that as well. It's that we we don't learn just one way. You might need to approach it a few different ways. The one thing I can see in the like you said, the people can't see your screen. I can see it. In the back, you've got the word Shine, and that's the name of your company. Your brand is Ignite Your Shine. And that's actually an acronym. Can you kind of take us through that and what that means? Like, go ahead, you can take it from there.
Yeah. Yes. So yeah, to be honest with you, it was not originally the word shine. It was the word smart. And it's because I grew up in school feeling really stupid and dumb. And the more I got into middle school, high school, my grades were declining. And if I showed you my report card, you'd actually see D's and F's on them. And I felt really stupid. And like I said, I got into college and I told you that first semester was a 1.2, put on probation. And so it wasn't until that I went and I thought, you know what? I really want to learn sign language. So before you kick me out, I would learn sign language. And so I looked it up, and the university offered it, but in order to take it, I had to go into education. That is when the fire was lit. Like, I completely turned around. My GPA turned around, my passion. I was loving what I was learning. And I couldn't wait to work with kids. And so take the word smart for a moment. That was that. Then I thought about all the students that I ended up having who were challenged with school like I was. I learned, like, I did well in elementary, but not so well in middle school, and definitely not in high school, except the classes that I did hands-on things such as biology. I rocked biology. I rocked anatomy because I have to do, right? It's just one of my biggest modalities of learning. And so when I encountered with students that, had the same challenges I did, I came up with all silly creative ways to learn content and to remember and to understand things that some of the kids were like, okay, that makes no sense. Why don't you just learn it? Like, because learning is not that simple for me and some of the other students, but I can get creative and show you a couple things. And so that was that. And then the final straw, though, was my daughter was in high school. And my daughter entered high school as a freshman with the desire to become a plastic surgeon for children with deformities. By the time she was in her junior year and had an awful experience with a teacher, and things were starting to happen before that, she felt stupid, she felt dumb, and she was going to leave high school as a junior and not return her senior year. You take all of that, and I'm going to go after the word smart in education. And somebody said to me, right or wrong, you'll never change the definition of education, or never change the definition of smart in education. Now, Jared, I know you don't know me well, but part of my personality went, watch me, right? Sure. And then the other part, that little bit of self-doubt said, what if they're right?
Sure.
And I'm actually grateful for that person, because I ended up changing the word to shine, which is a much more broader point of view and more encompassing of what we're doing with social emotional learning. And really the core of what we're doing is we're building up confidence in people. Because when you're confident, you'll take the risks. You don't believe that you can't do it. You're willing to fail and make mistakes. You're willing to try different things, and you're willing to step into who you are, to own who you are, and to be okay with who you are, which also, by the way, affects suicides, bullying, right? Those kinds of things that they go down. I'm not saying they'll go away, but they will diminish, because if you think about someone who bullies another person, they only bully to make themselves feel better. So they put somebody else down to feel better. The problem with that is they actually don't feel better, so they bully more. Well, if you step into believing who you are and we teach each other to honor and value, that's a whole different perspective. Yeah. So SHINE stands for, the acronym is S, all about self. What are your strengths, gifts, skills, and talents? Identifying that and standing in that. H is heart. In other words, passion, but ignite your spine doesn't work as well. So we did heart for passion, right? So ignite your shine. So it's all about passion. And it depends on who I'm working with, whether it's leaders, whether it's teachers, whether it's parents, whether it's students, we spin this a little bit different, but the whole goal is that with passion, it's in strengths. When you put the two together, that's the powerful package, because if one is missing, either you burn out or you have a hobby. Like, that's what it boils down to, right? So it's, how do you set yourself up in life, even though things will shift? Like, for example, you're not always going to have the same passions that you always have, but if you're aware of that, there's themes that run with that. So we work with people on that. Then I is inspire, because you know your strengths and you know your passions. Now, how do you stay inspired? Because life happens. Curveballs are thrown, whether it's something minor like a flat tire on the road to a pandemic. And then N is navigate. What are you going to do with the strengths, the passions, inspiration? You know how to stay inspired and inspire others, but what are you going to do with all of that? In other words, what are your goals, or where do you want to be, or possible story or journey? And when it comes to kids, one of the things we want to see is the door blown open to that. You don't have to go to college. That's a whole other conversation. But you also don't have to think, I have to be an attorney, or I have to be an architect, or I have to be a politician, or I have to be. No, you get to choose. But unfortunately at the secondary level, they don't always know what's even possible out there. And then we get to E, and E is exceptional, because you're becoming the exceptional person you were meant to be, not anybody else. So ignite your shine.
And I'm looking at your website right now, which is really well done here. What kind
Thank you, because it's being totally redone, but thank you.
Well,
literally as we speak.
Well, Mike, if somebody's listening and they are like, hey, this is really resonating with me, what you're sharing is something our staff needs to hear. What are your workshops? You've got workshops, it sounds like. You've got keynotes. Like, what different services do you offer school districts?
Yes, so, there's obviously in person, which I'm still doing a little bit of. If a
True.
district is
Yeah.
comfortable with that, I've done a couple so far in schools and same thing. But we do anywhere from a keynote, although we call them fun notes because I bring some supplies with me, or we do some very interactive. I am not a sit and get person. I'm not going to model one thing and preach the other thing. So we do fun notes. We also do fun shops instead of workshops. So clearly we get a lot of work done. But I don't want people to dread coming, but that looks like any way you want it to look like. We work within the schedule of what is provided. So, it can be, I even go to schools and work with professional learning communities, and that's how I meet with teams that way. So it's the cores and the principle and the framework is there, but we work with the school or the district to say, hey, what do you have available to you? What can we do? And then we fit with you.
I have found it, definitely a different perspective. We had our back to school. Usually I give a keynote to our staff, if you want to call it that, or a fun note, whatever you want to call it. But I usually and this year it was just so different. It was difficult because sounds like I'm used to having things going on and moving around. And have you found it difficult? Or just maybe, and I'm going off a little bit, but how have you adjusted to life really having to do most of these virtual versus in person?
I would say there's pros and cons to it. At first, I was devastated, inside thinking, "Oh my goodness." Like I thrive on seeing your face and you having that aha or that what are you talking about or watching that interaction, that engagement and I'm very aware of the body language, facial expressions, and everything that's happening in a room. And that informs me on what to do as a speaker or what not to do. And I felt like I lost all of that. And then I was introduced to Zoom. So here's when I do Zoom with schools or districts, I ask one that it be Zoom because I also have a Mac and it doesn't always play nice with some of the other platforms.
Sure. Yeah.
But I also ask it to not be webinar. I ask for it to be the meeting platform because I can see faces. They can see me clearly. We interact, we engage. I just thought that my entire world was upside down at that point. I thought, how do you engage with you without being a talking head? And oh, are there ways? And I have had a ball. So I've done some keynotes. I just kicked one off out in Bakersdale, California a couple weeks ago. A superintendent brought me in for that. And so we've had so much fun. And now I'm like, okay, I can do either way. You just put me in whichever one. I just want to be able to see faces though and be able to interact and engage. And what's really, really cool about this is that unlike any other keynote, when it's virtual, everybody can put in comments in the chat with questions I ask, comments I make, and I can see all that. And I can say, oh, Janice, I see that you put this, or, oh, I totally agree with you, Jared, that 100% spot on. And it's where things like in a keynote, I never had that before. We had some interaction, but I didn't get to see what everybody was thinking or doing. And, as far as in that setting. So to me, there's a pros and cons to both, and I am loving it.
This is where this podcast, we always try to dig into the details and try to from the experts, the ones who are doing things successfully. Any other tricks you can share with us that you've learned about Zoom, that you could, one or two other tricks that you're like, oh, this has totally changed my presentations?
I will say standing up is going to be the number one thing. It is, and I first few that I did, I was sitting like I am right now. And my energy gets excited because I have passion for what I do. I love what I do. I love sharing and learning with others. But when you are delivering something, there's a difference in your body language and the energy level. I get excited, like I said, so my energy level is high, but when I stand every time I do a presentation, and there's just such a difference with it. And some people have said, I never thought about standing. I'm like, and I didn't at first, but I knew something was different. And it wasn't until I stood up that I went, this is what it is. This is it. So I would recommend standing if you're comfortable with that.
Sure. And here's maybe an amateur question here from my end, but what do you do for you got a nice background there. I mean, it's really well decorated. Is that your background that I'm seeing with the decorations? Is that where you will do your keynotes from or your webinars, or is that true?
Yes, yes. And what happened is, so I've over the years, the 12 years of speaking, the biggest question I get from most people are, how do I get into consulting? How do I do what you do? So pre-pandemic, I was already building a course on taking my 12 years of experience of consulting and teaching people how to do it. So I had a teacher build the backdrop of what you're seeing, which is it's floor panels. It's what wood flooring would
Nice,
be.
nice
And
looking.
he hung it for me. And so, but it's served great now because that it serves as a backdrop for everything I do.
So
Yep.
I'm looking at her screen. I'm like, man, there's all kinds of, it looks nice. There's flowers. There's like, there's some things hanging from the wall. There's books. In mine, I'm in my office. I've got a printer, I've got a clock, and I've got a file cabinet here. So take some notes if you're going to do some of these things professionally, to really spruce up that background and make it, because it does look nice. I noticed that right away.
Well,
Uh,
thank you. And Jared, I'll also tell you, so I know everybody can't see this, but I have shadow boxes behind me. I had them made by the same teacher, but here's the thing. So we actually have lessons that are free for educators, and they're Ignite Your Shine. We call them Shine-tastic lessons. And so what ended up happening is I reshot the videos for them. So there are lessons that videos, I should say, that students watch, and then the teachers roll out the hands-on lessons. Well, because we did S.H.I.N.E, 5 different letters, my shadow boxes had a different object that related to what I was teaching in that video. So educators, think about what you're putting in your background as that could actually support the learning, that it could be an object that you're talking about or some kind of metaphor.
Love it. Yeah. The more and more real virtual learning, I know in Florida, virtual learning has been pretty big for a while now. Here in Iowa, virtual learning, man, we are we are getting thrown into it. And there's so many things that I don't think teachers think about, just in terms of the things that you just mentioned about, are there learning opportunities even with the background, even with what you've got? And I couldn't think of the term, the shadow boxes. You're right. I couldn't on the spot. I was like, I'm not sure what those are. Okay.
That's all right. There are things on the wall.
Yeah. The thing, man. Okay. But this is really random. So I see the picture of Ohio up there. I believe that's the state of Ohio. Is that correct? So
That is correct.
we're at in Ohio. I know you're living in Tampa right now. Where at in Ohio did you live?
I lived in the Columbus area.
The Columbus area.
But
And that's
I was born in Northern Ohio. So I went to Kent State. So I was
okay.
in Northern Ohio a good chunk, but yeah, Central.
So Central, are you an Ohio State fan then, or yeah?
OHIO.
Are we going to get a season here or what? What's the word? Is there going to be a season played or?
I haven't heard yet. I'm too hung up on the Tampa Bay Lightning going into hopefully the final game tonight. So
wow.
then I'll pay attention to my Buckeyes.
Oh, nice. Well, okay. Well, cool. Let's transition here. You've seen the interview question. We've already asked a ton of questions about you, your company, the things you've done. Now we're going to kind of dig into just some of the quick hitters in terms of, the routines, the habits, the tricks, the things that you can pass along to us educational leaders, about how you run your life there. So the first question before you even get there is, I know Tampa's we're a big area there, so you got a lot to choose from, and I switched this up slightly from last show, so this might be a little bit different. But if I visit Tampa, which I've done numerous times, what is one place maybe off the beaten path? We all know about Busch Gardens. We all know about Gasparilla. We all know about Ybor City, right? Are those right? Correct? Am I correct there?
Yes, you are correct.
So how about
our hot spots?
what is one place someone visiting would have to check out if they're down in Tampa, which a lot of us Midwesterners go down there?
Can I give you two?
That's fine. Go for it.
Okay, so one, it depends upon when you come, but down at Apollo Beach, which is just south of Tampa by like 20 minutes, there's the Manatee Station. So we have Tico, the electric company, and because the waters warm up, the manatees come in there. So you will go to the Manatee viewing station and you will see like literally hundreds of manatees. So that is one thing I would tell you. A lot of people don't really know about that. But the other thing is the Riverwalk in Tampa. Now, don't think Riverwalk San Antonio. It's different. It's a Riverwalk that goes about 2.5 miles long. And on one end is an area called Armature Works. And it's an old waterworks place that when you go in there, they have put all kinds of restaurants in there. And so you go to whatever restaurant you want. So if you come with a family, everybody goes to a different restaurant and then you converge. So if you think kind of like cafeteria in a school, right? Everybody go get their food and then they come and sit. On the opposite end, you have the Columbia restaurant, which is world famous. It's the Columbia Cafe. It's not the actual real original restaurant, but it's the cafe. But also at the end is a new area called Sparkman's Wharf. And Sparkman's Wharf has all of these different little, they're like shipping containers, but they're all restaurants. And so you go up to the shipping container, order your food, and then go sit in the grassy area along the port where the cruise ships come in. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Like I said, a lot of, it just seems like everybody you talk to in the Midwest travels down to Florida at some point, whether it's just for spring break. I mean, again, kind of with COVID, it's kind of, this is all like wishful thinking, but spring break or going down to bowl games or whatever it is, we're always going down there in the winter, it seems like. So Apollo Beach and Riverwalk, is that correct?
You got it.
Okay, awesome. Your next question. So in the last 6 months, what is the best $50 purchase or less, it could be less than 50, that you have made?
Okay, so I live in a high rise and we have a balcony. So
okay. Yeah.
I bought these little chairs that they pop open, but you're sitting on the ground, but it has like a mat that comes out from it. So you can lay on the mat, but lean against it. So during the pandemic here, bought that. And my daughter and I pretend that we're laying out, but it's just our cement beach instead of the beach.
So
there you have it.
If I'm trying to find this, search for it, what would I search?
I don't even know.
Did you get it online?
Yes, I got on Amazon. So I probably put it in beach chairs or chairs for the beach, something like that. Okay. And so it's not an actual pop-up chair. It's just the back of it pops up. Okay. It's really, unique, but folds completely flat and you can carry it like on your back or carry it almost like a backpack. But it's really, really flat.
Okay. Well,
I'll send you the link if you want it. I can go into my orders.
Yeah. Go through your orders. Send me what you ordered there. I always try to share what the special gadgets or special things that people have purchased. So I'm definitely not finding it. I'm at Amazon and there's over 10,000 results for beach chairs. So I'll have to move on.
I'll take care of you, Jared. Okay. I'll take care of you.
So I'm really curious on this next one about books. What is the one book that has greatly influenced your professional life?
Oh, I could name a lot, but the one isn't just professionally, it's also personally, and it's going to be probably a lot of people's answer, Dr. Brene Brown, and it's Rising Strong. That's the one, talking again, coming from someone who felt stupid and tried, for years and years have tried to overcome that and that big challenge and that lack of belief in self, that learning to rise strong, but particularly what spoke to me a lot was about the fact that we make stories and about anything that happens, we create a story around it when we don't even know if that's really the true story. And I know with the brain, I often talk about what becomes a thought becomes a belief. So, it's the same thing with that concept there. And I really valued when it came to any kind of relationship, instead of me making up a story and saying, oh, you know why they did that, or oh, they rolled their eyes and that was totally at me, or when they talked to somebody else, I'm sure it was about me. I was creating stories professionally and personally that weren't necessarily true.
Mm-hmm. The question I was going to ask you earlier is, in the field of neuroscience now, or brain research, again, that's always intimidating for me to try to understand and wrap my head around. Is there one author or one researcher that you're like, you got to check this person out? He or she makes it super easy to understand. Besides yourself, is there somebody else out there who you could point us towards?
Absolutely. So I'm not the best either at always bridging, and we have to be careful because just because there's like been one study that's small or happens that we oftentimes will run with it and say, oh, this is so true, and it's not. There's still so much about the brain that we don't even understand, or we think we understand and may not necessarily be accurate. But there's a couple people I really enjoy, but the one mostly is Dr. Judy Willis. And Dr. Judy Willis, she actually was a neuroscientist for I think 14 years and then went into the classroom for 10 to watch her research in action. and she has a lot of books put out by ASCD.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
she's
Great.
phenomenal. She's actually, I'm one of the people that I've traveled with multiple times.
Wow. Wow.
When we've, yeah, she's amazing, amazing. So definitely, I love her work. It's vetted very much.
Okay. Okay. So the next question is, what is the best culture hack that you have used in your professional setting? So usually, I'm talking to people who are in K through 12, and they've either, they've used it as a classroom teacher, or as a principal, as a superintendent. So I'm kind of curious. You can go any way you want with this. Maybe it was back when you were a teacher. Maybe it's in your current profession right now.
Mhm. So I'm going to say it's vulnerability. That is my biggest number one culture hack. When we act like we're perfect, and I thought I had to be perfect for years, I am now grateful to say that I'm a recovering perfectionist. We adopt so much, and we often think that we can't make mistakes or we can't mess up, and we're human, right? And humans mess up. That's part of the journey and enjoyment, and a lot of times I think we take away from that. So one of the biggest things when I tell my personal story, like in my fun notes, when I tell that, like that's when people really connect, and they come up to me often. They're like, you know what, I thought I was the only one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what they don't realize is I was in that same boat until I started sharing, and people said to me, you know what, I similar situation, or that happened to me, or what about this? And I went, oh my goodness, I'm not the only one. And then what really hit me the first time when I actually told my personal story was when I was giving a high school graduation commencement speech to a group of high school students who were the first in their families to graduate from high school. And I remember thinking, how am I going to relate to them? And then I thought, my personal story. And when I shared it, one of the quotes that I'm often quoted for is, we don't call them, for example, Ignite Your Shine, bad days or tough days. We call them moments. Because when you say it's been a bad day or a tough day, you wrote off the entire day and you forgot to look for some of the good things that happened. And so we call them moments. And so the quote that I said in the graduation commencement speech is that with my whole thing, what I used to do is allow moments to define me. So I say, moments don't define you, allow them to refine you, right? Because we have that choice. A moment can define us. And I let moments in my life totally define me for years. But moments don't define you. Allow them to refine you. And at the end, I had a young lady come up to me, a graduate, and she had tears streaming down her face. And she hugged me because I'm a hugger. And I was like, yes, bring it in. And she said, I'm very much like you. And when she told me why, she then looked at me and said, but you know what I learned? Moments don't define me. I have to allow them to refine me. And I was like, yes,
Cool.
yes. So to me, that's a big hack.
Okay. Yeah, love it. And it kind of goes along with the Brene Brown work too, right? She's huge on the vulnerability, and
Yep.
I can tell even just in our conversations, in this conversation, this last 45 minutes about your struggles in school. I mean, it's just you've been there. And I think sometimes that gives you, and you already know this, but better perspective when when having to talk with different groups and people who have struggled. So I appreciate you sharing that.
No problem.
What the next question, and again, a little bit different spin with your work there, but what is one impactful professional practice you use that few others in your position do?
So my position is probably a little more unique compared to some of the people that you work with, but it's going to go back to the standing, but standing with people. So like when I do, for example, a fun note, keynote, or a workshop of any kind, I don't stay on the stage. As a matter of fact, when I gave that high school graduation commencement speech, I asked, do I have to stay on the stage? And they're like, well, most of the time they do. And I'm like, but I'm not here for everybody out there. I'm not here for the parents. I'm here for the graduates. And so I literally went down, stepped. Well, that's how I am, because that's how I connect with people. So I think we have to remember that sometimes it's okay to break the status quo. It's okay to do something that you want. So standing could really be a metaphorical term, but it could also be literally standing, like when you're giving a presentation, like I mentioned earlier, when you're doing a webinar.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you're right. I don't think I've ever been to a graduation ceremony where somebody actually left the podium. So that's a cool. That took some guts to do, to kind of change the norm there and do that for the students. So no, I think it's a great idea. Okay, let's dig into your daily routine, because you are super successful. You have a lot of things going. Talk to us about your daily routine and any advice that you could share.
So one of the things that I learned along the way, and Jared, you and I talked about this earlier, is the word batching. And, it's hard when you're in an office, for example, and you're constantly being pulled in one direction or another and calls. But to me, so when I'm traveling, it becomes very difficult with my days are very broken up then too, because, catching a flight and then going to a hotel, then going here and there and et cetera. So, what I started doing was that instead of saying, okay, this day is going to be this, what I started doing was breaking my days up. So I said, okay, when I am home or when I have a semi-normal routine, I break the day into 2 days or like two halves. I'll say that. So in the morning, I call it my creation time.
Mm.
And then the afternoon, I call it my connection time. So if it has to do with a phone call, a webinar, anything that I'm delivering, we try the best to make sure that it's in the afternoon because I'm most creative in the morning. So
Mm.
if I'm doing my calls in the morning and then trying to be creative in the afternoon, doesn't work as well for me. Now, since I'm home more, and I know a lot of people are working from home more, I tend to batch my days more. So, for example, today, as you said earlier, it was really busy for me. It was super busy, but that's designed on purpose so that all my other days aren't as insanely batched up. So,
Mhm.
one of the things with the brain that I know is that when we connect with something, like we get distracted by something, it takes us a while to get back on track. And so I call it hijacking, whether it's someone walking into the room hijacking, whether it's a phone ringing all of a sudden, whatever it may be, there's a lot of hijacking. So what I do is I try to protect my time and I try to say, okay, this is when I'm doing this. But the rest of the time, I really try to protect it so that I don't have the hijacking occurring and I can get the things done that I need to get done. And some days I win at that and some days I lose, but it's always the goal.
So talk a little bit about your mornings. So it's your creative time. Just give us some more details on that. What are you doing during your creative time? Uh, just share a few more thoughts there.
Yeah. So in the morning, almost every morning, and I have a battle with this to be honest with you, but every morning I go for a walk. Now, I don't like to do the walk because when I do the walk, it gets into my creative time. But I also find that's when I do some of my best thinking. And it makes sense with brain research, right? So I go out and I do about a 50-minute walk and I come back and I just feel like so good. And a lot of times I've worked through some things in my head, or if I know what's coming up that day, I've already been thinking through some of those things. Or if I'm challenged with putting together a new slide deck, a new presentation, whatever it may be that we're working on. So when I come back, I quickly shower and then I dive right in because I know the more time I'm losing, the less creative I am. But we know that oxygen to the brain and exercise really amplifies you and keeps you awake and alert. And I want that creativity at that point. So I do that as much as I can. And then if I start to feel myself wane, if I feel like I can't get myself back into it, then I let it go. I used to in the past go, come on, you got to do this. You got to focus. You can't, because I am someone who works best under pressure. I really do. Like I can think creatively. I can get it done. I will not miss the deadline except for the, K-12 on the book.
Yeah.
But in that, I don't really miss deadlines. I don't want to. And so, it's really finding that pattern of what works. That's what works for me, but for others. But now I really, if I lose it, like I'm losing that creativity, I give myself the space and go, okay, it's okay. You're going to pick up there next time you feel more creative. But the brain is always working on things, which is really cool. So at other times I'll spark and go, oh, here's the answer. Here's what it is. And come back to it.
So I'm going to keep digging deeper on the details here. So during your walk, are you listening to anything? Is it in silence? Do you have a cell phone with you? Do you talk to me? Because I completely agree with everything you're saying. And I think I become more and more believer of those walks is when some of your ideas come to you. So just tell me, do you have any, just answer that question, I guess. What do you do? What do you have with you? Are you on your own or headphones or cell phone or what?
So I always have headphones in and have my cell phone with me. And I'm usually listening to a podcast. I'm also on Voxer. So sometimes I'm connecting with my team through Voxer on different things. But if I'm not listening to podcasts and I'm not doing one of those things, I really try podcasting as my number one. But if not, then I try to do some silence because sometimes it's just, I call it marinating, where your brain is like spinning and spinning on things. And in that silence of just walking, suddenly it pops in. But that's when I'll then jump on Voxer and my team knows that my brain is going because I'm like, okay, we got to do this. And they're like, and she's off.
So what
So yeah.
podcasts, what are your go-to podcasts then?
Gosh, I listen to so many different ones, but again, Brene Brown, she has hers out now. I listen to Tony Robbins occasionally too, with just listening to that positivity. I will give an example. Last week, I was hitting a point where I was feeling drained and I was feeling tired. And I put on one of his podcasts and I immediately felt that motivation. So that helped me too. I listen to more business ones as well. So Donald Miller from Story Brand, I listen to him. He's a big one. So it really is a big variety, but those are probably the majority, the ones I listen to majority of the time.
Okay. So the next question kind of ties into kind of the things we've been talking about, but the question is, what is the best tip you can share about being productive? So you've already shared a few of those tips, but is there anything else that we haven't hit on or something that you want to rehash?
Yes. So I have tried so many different things and they just don't work for me. And then I found, I don't know if you're familiar with Michael Hyatt, but he has what's called the Full Focus Planner. And it is amazing for me because every Sunday, I can't wait for Sundays. Like I love Sundays because I do a review of the week and I look back on the week as what were my wins and I look for what worked, what didn't work, what needs improved, what do I start doing, what do I stop doing. And then I set myself up for the next week. And that's how this planner is completely designed. And so, and I can give you the link to that if you want. I will let you know I'm an affiliate of them. And the reason I say that is because I want you to know that, but that's not why I do this. It's the one thing that has actually worked for me. So that's why I said, hey, can I become an affiliate?
Yeah.
So, but you go in every day and you put your three big rocks, so, three big goals, but those three goals relate to the big goals that you're really what you're trying to accomplish. So if you think even from a district level, what's the one big goal that you all are trying to implement and do? And then you make sure that whether it's every day, whether it's every Monday, however you put that in, you put that into your planner as the things that have to get done. And those are the things that get done first. Obviously, there are different circumstances, but that's the goal, is to do those first so that you're always really making achievement toward the goal and not letting all of those little things come into play. The second thing I'll say, because I know you work with a lot of administrators, is I don't know if any of you are familiar with the SAMS project, but it's the school administrator management one. Yeah, my husband is a SAM. I am fascinated by how that product works.
Yeah. For those of the regular listeners to this podcast, it's crazy how many people, and I think this is the first time that Mike Hyatt's planner has been brought up, but like 2/3 of the time when we talk about um, habits, routines, or productivity hacks, like people are talking about either a planner, a journal, or some sort of journaling or writing. So this is like, for those of you out there, and I've started doing some things, and gosh, I've read so many different, the bullet journal method. I've read, there's just so many different like theories out there on like what the best type of Covey's has his, that's out there. But just the importance of writing, reflecting, putting your thoughts down. And I guess I was going to ask you this: when you have those sudden bursts of creativity, and you're like, "That's what I want to write down." Are you typing that down, or are you going to your planner and writing that down? Or are you just writing it down wherever you can? Or tell me about that.
I do a brain dump. So sometimes it's literally every thought. I'm just as fast as I can writing them down. I tend to write faster because if I'm typing and I see it misspelled or mistyped, then I'm going to go back and correct it. Where writing, I don't do that.
Okay.
Or other times I just take a big sheet of paper. I have easel paper here, or I have the big, what are they called? Post-it notes, like the huge ones.
Oh yeah.
And I just start throwing everything up there. And sometimes it's like doing like a mind map, where I take the main objective and I start going, okay, this is a category and this is a category, but wait, off of that category is this. And that just, I'm very like visual in that way of being able to see everything down. So I can also, it's great to be able to manipulate it and move it too. So I use, if anyone's ever heard of these I don't know how you say it, Frixion or friction pens, but they're markers or pens that literally erase. So I love them. Like they're all right here on my desk, and it doesn't matter where I write in my planner, whether I write in brainstorming, I can quickly erase something and move it, but yet it's in pen or color because it's a marker.
One more question before I go on to the question about your goal. Have you just some of the things, just the way you think is really advanced, and it's really allowing you to get a lot of your goals accomplished. Have you always thought this way, or you're shaking your head no? And you even mentioned how you struggled in school, and when did the light bulb go on? Was it one moment in time? Was it over the course of time? Or just tell me about how you've gotten to now, how you've just have the structure for you to help be successful. Talk about that.
I feel like I've tried almost everything, like everything you had mentioned, Covey, and I think they're great for different people, right?
Mhm.
I've tried the bullet journaling. I did that I think I went through 2 bullet journals. I've tried gratitude journals. I've tried pretty much every system you think of. And this is why I think it's so important for you to try and just keep trying until something clicks. And it really was the full focus planner that did this for me, because forced me to come up with my top 3 things and all of those little things that can take my entire day, because to me they're important, but they're also easier to do. So I will go to them first instead of always doing the bigger things that I need to work on. So this helped me. I get in the same page that I see my 3 things plus all my little things. I'm literally looking at it right now because I always have it near me. But then what's happening throughout the day, and then on the right are my notes. So like right now, if you ask me something, I will jot down a keyword right here on this page. So like if there's something that I know I referenced, I will go into my calendar and say, oh, Jared and I met on September 15th or whatever date it is. I turn in my full focus planner to that, and I can see the notes. So same thing when I'm talking with the school or district, like I did today. We're moving for some PD, and sure enough, here are my notes right in front of me. So I know where my notes are. I tried digital, and it does not work for me, and I wish it did.
Sure. Very cool. Okay. You got a lot of goals going, a lot of things, a lot of irons in the fire, but what is the one big goal? If you could narrow it down to one, what's the one big goal right now that you're trying to accomplish?
So it's a professional learning library. It is it's a beast. But one of the things that we find, so even though I go out and speak or do virtual talks, and I have some speakers trained to do the same thing with my content, sometimes it'll be where it just doesn't work out for one of us to go or to be there, or budget is an issue. So we are building a professional learning library under Ignite Your Shine, and basically we're recording everything except my keynote. We're recording everything that takes you from, Ignite Your Shine takes you through S.H.I.N.E all the way into how do you take SEL and unite it with content, to the things that are in my book on engagement and brain research, and then into I have some fun shops on it's the brain and reading, things that people have never learned, and I've never seen it anywhere. And it's a mentor of mine who's phenomenal, who is retiring. He said, I don't want this to go to waste. And when I saw this, like I've delivered it several times, and people's minds are blown, and like, this is incredible. So I have that for reading, and I also have one for math. And so right now it's hard to let everybody know about everything and get it into people's hands and to use it. And I thought, why don't we just create a professional learning library that makes it more accessible to everybody? So super excited about it. It's a lot of work, but I know it's gonna be worth it. So
Sure.
I'm
So
very excited.
you referenced the updated website earlier. Is that something that we will see at some point down the road on the website? Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah, so right now it's actually the Prime to Shine one is being built, because it's the consulting side where we're teaching people. We already got a membership site and a whole course for people that want to get into consulting, whatever that looks like, how minimal or how big that looks for people. But as soon as that's done, we have what's called a wireframe that has already been done for the Ignite Your Shine one. So once that is the Prime to Shine is done, then we'll do the Ignite Your Shine one. And
Okay.
then, yes, you'll see there. But right now, if people went to igniteyoursshine.com, they'll obviously see things that we do, not that. But if they wait for like 10 seconds, they'll have a pop-up window that offers a way to get the lessons. So, and and just of course, if anyone has any questions or anything, you can always reach out to me directly.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you for sharing that. I'm excited to kind of see how that comes along there.
Me too.
Very cool. Okay, so we always end with a story. So, and geez, you do this for a living, so I'm kind of excited to hear you've shared a few other stories, but any single coolest story that you could share with us about just being in education.
Is it okay if it's about educational consulting?
Hey, absolutely.
That works.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is a little bit of a crazy story.
Okay.
I'll try to shorten it, and I'm going to tell you that this is something that no one should ever do. I'm just going to preface it with that.
Okay. I like it.
So, all right. So I was flying into Lubbock, Texas, and I got into Dallas, Texas. My flight had been delayed, and so I stepped off the plane in Dallas at 9:35 p.m. and discovered that my flight at 9:35 had already left. Well, I had to be in Lubbock, Texas for 800 teachers, and I had promised my publisher that I would be there. And I was flying from another speaking engagement. So I'm standing at the gate, and I said to the woman, so I missed my flight. She said, you did, but the good news is we can get you on a flight tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. I said, well, that sounds wonderful, but I have 800 teachers that are waiting for me. So I'm going to have to drive throughout the night. And she goes, ma'am, you do realize that's an 8-hour drive. And I said, I don't have a choice, because I have to be there. I will not let educators down. So so I knew I was going to drive throughout the night. What I didn't tell you yet is my grandma had passed away the night before. So I was on about 3.5 hours of sleep. So I knew driving out in the country of Texas was not going to be a good idea. So here comes the part that none of you should ever do. A gentleman is standing beside me. I'm waiting to talk to the lady. And he said, actually my partner already got a limo. So if you want to ride with me, we can take you to Lubbock. And he said, so the driver is already out there. I'm gonna meet him. And immediately I went, oh, no way. Absolutely not, in my head. But of course I'm reading him, I'm assessing him. And I thought, all right, let me go meet this driver. Let me see and watch your interaction, see if you actually know each other or not. So we go out there, and it looks great to me. Like, they don't know each other. And he said, listen, she's actually going to Lubbock. So where you're taking me is 45 minutes away. Would you mind taking me first and then dropping her off in Lubbock? And the driver's like, no, that's not a problem at all. So I get in the car and I let my publisher know, and I immediately get a phone call. Get out of the car. What are you doing? No, absolutely not. And I'm like, yeah, a little too late. Always already on the highway. So they're like, we'll call you back. Someone higher up in the company calls me. We need you out of the car. I'm like, can't happen on the highway. And they said, all right, well then we need to know, driver's license, the make and model of the car. We need to know who's in the car, the company of the limo, all this. I give them everything. So the gentleman beside me, because we're in the limo in the back, he said to me, so what do you do? I said, I'm a consultant for education. He goes, me too. Okay, now I have to be honest with you. I got a little weirded out, right? And I thought, wait, what? And he said, yeah, I'm in education too. And I said, really? And I said, so like, when it comes to consulting, like what research do you look at? And he said, most of it is Richard Tafore and Doug Reeves. Okay, many educators don't even know those names. So I knew he was 100% legit with that, right? So I was like, okay, all right. So mind you, I get dropped off in Lubbock. They drop me off first. I'm safe. Obviously, I'm fine. I'm here talking. I end up sending an edible arrangement to him, but could not remember his name like I did at the time. But years later, I don't remember it. This was now 11 years ago, I think. 2 years ago, I'm speaking at a conference. It's the SAM conference, actually, we already brought up. And I'm standing in a circle, and this gentleman, I introduced myself. He's like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. And we're chit-chatting, a bunch of us together. And I'm looking down, and all of a sudden I went, I know that voice. And I looked up at him, because remember, it's nighttime. I didn't see his face. I heard his voice. I looked at him and I go, did you ever fly into Texas, Dallas, and drop a strange woman off in Lubbock? And he went, oh my gosh, that's you? And I'm like,
Wow.
yes.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy. I'm glad I asked that, because that was an awesome story. It sounds like it worked out. That I was afraid, man, there was going to be police involved, and you're going to be missing for a couple of weeks or something, but it all worked out.
Yeah, my family, my publisher, nobody was happy about me on that one. And I understand that. I totally get that. But I will tell you, driving that night on that little sleep that I had, I wouldn't have made it. I'm telling you, this little guardian or something that was out there saying she needs help.
Having missed a flight just a year ago, and when you're faced with, and we missed our flight to Nashville, which is like a 12-hour drive, and we had no other options. And it was like, there was somebody who was offering us a ride, and you kind of were like intrigued by the idea at that point. So I totally get it. Wow, that's cool. And just the fact that it came full circle 11 years later. Did you talk with him? Did you have a chance to interact once you made the connection then?
Yes. Oh, okay. Yes. I mean, we hugged immediately, and he's like, thank you for the edible arrangement. And I'm like, you're so welcome. And then the next year when I spoke at the conference again, he was there again, and we're going to be there again this coming year too. So it's so great to see him. I just had this extra special bond with him, because he was the one that reached out and then gave me the opportunity to have a safe ride.
Yeah.
and so
And then
it's
you
awesome.
met, and then you had a chance to speak with the teachers in Lubbock, and
Yes,
all was
everything worked
well.
out.
So, well,
Yep.
hey, gosh, it was a fun interview. I appreciate it. I always get a little anxious or nervous when I don't know somebody, but you've made it super easy. So, this was LaVonna Roth, the internationally known author, keynote speaker, and consultant. And LaVonna, what is the best way if people like what they heard, and I don't know how they couldn't have, but what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Oh, well, there's plenty that don't know about me. So thank you. And it's been a lot of fun too, Jared. You're very easy to talk to. So thank you. But I can be emailed directly, LaVonna, LaVonna at igniteyourshine.com. But I'm also on all social media platforms as my name or as at Ignite Your Shine, except Instagram is at Ignite Your Shine now.
Okay. Okay. Um, well, is there anything that we didn't quite get to that you wanted to share before we wrap things up?
Not that I can think of. I just want to thank you and all educators because no one signed up for this and nobody has a manual for this, and you all are pouring your hearts out. And I just want you to know, no matter what is being said, sometimes by people who aren't always aware of the education world and knowing what's going on and understanding the work that you're putting in, please know it does not go unnoticed by those of us that know, and we are cheering you on. And I'm personally here for you in any way that I can help you. So big hugs to all of you, and thank you.
All right. Well, hey, thank you so much. Again, that was LaVonna Roth. That was episode number 28 here on the Group Project Podcast. If you haven't already, make sure to drop that 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, or if you follow us on Spotify, make sure to subscribe so you will not miss any future episodes. So, LaVonna, you had a busy day. Thank you so much. Great talking to you, and gosh, good luck with everything you're doing.
Same to you, and thank you, Jared.
Okay, thank you.